Brooke Langford's laugh slices through the courtroom like a blade. "This is a joke, right?" She smirks, leaning back in her chair as if Judge Frank Caprio were just another inconvenience on her busy schedule. 20 years old, designer blazer, daughter of Senator Charles Langford, she's used to doors opening before she even knocks. Today, she thinks, will be no different. But Caprio's eyes don't flinch. They study her, measure her. "Miss Langford," he says calmly, "in this courtroom, you answer when addressed, and you listen when someone's been hurt. What Brooke doesn't know yet is that a body cam is waiting to speak. A disabled child missed a critical therapy session because of her choices, and a series of quiet phone calls from her father's office are about to be dragged into the light. Before we go any further, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now, and if you believe the law shouldn't bow to power, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what happens next." The clerk reads the case number, and the shuffle of papers echoes like distant thunder. Brooke shifts in her seat, crossing her arms as though the folder in front of Judge Caprio contains nothing more than a minor annoyance. But the judge's tone, calm even, surgical, says otherwise. Docket 48291. Commonwealth versus Brooke Alexandra Langford, he announces. Charges: excessive speed in a residential zone, unauthorized use of a van-accessible parking space, failure to comply with a lawful order. There is no drama in his voice, no anger, and somehow that makes everything heavier. The young woman lifts her chin. "I already said I'll pay the fines. Isn't that what this is about?" Caprio tilts his glasses down, not condescending, just clarifying. "This court is not a payment portal, Miss Langford. We're here to establish what happened and why." Her attorney, Samuel Pierce, leans forward as though hoping to intercept the moment before it breaks. "Your Honor, Miss Langford would like to resolve this promptly." She understands the citation and is willing, Counselor Caprio interrupts. "Your client's willingness to swipe a credit card doesn't resolve the underlying conduct." The courtroom air thickens. Even Brooke's smirk dims slightly, though she tries to resurrect it with a raised eyebrow. Caprio turns a page in the file. "Before we discuss Monday morning, I see here that Miss Langford received a prior administrative warning last spring for blocking an accessibility ramp on her campus." He pauses. "Is that correct?" Samuel clears his throat. "It was a misunderstanding, Your Honor. A student filed a complaint, but Miss Langford moved her vehicle. After 3 hours," Caprio notes, reading directly from the report. "A wheelchair user was unable to enter the building during that time." Brooke rolls her eyes. "It was campus chaos week. Everyone was parking everywhere. I didn't know someone needed the ramp right then." "That's precisely the point," Caprio replies. "You didn't know. You didn't consider whether someone might need it." For the first time, the mask on Brooke's face flickers, not remorse, but irritation. She glances around the room, as if searching for someone who will nod along, someone who will understand that all of this is being blown out of proportion. Caprio continues, "A warning is not a punishment. It's guidance. When the same kind of behavior arises again, it suggests the guidance wasn't absorbed." Samuel places a hand gently on Brooke's arm, a reminder to stay quiet, though he knows she won't. "So what?" she snaps. "I was running late. I parked for like 10 minutes. This is spiraling into some moral lecture." "No," Caprio counters softly. "It's spiraling because you treated public infrastructure as optional and the law as negotiable." The room remains still, hanging on every word. The judge flips to a new page. "Let's walk through Monday morning. Start from the beginning." Brooke exhales sharply. "Fine. I woke up late. I had to pick up my medication from the pharmacy. I drove down Larchmont Avenue, found one open spot, and parked. When I came out, there's a ticket on my windshield and a tow truck hooking up my Audi. That's it. That's your big crime scene." "You parked in a van-accessible space," Caprio clarifies. "It was the only spot open. That doesn't change what it was. No one was using it," she fires back. Caprio's voice softens in a way that somehow feels more severe. Miss Langford, accessible spaces are not like regular spaces. They are designed precisely for individuals who cannot simply wait for another one. Harm isn't measured by whether you saw someone. Harm is measured by whether someone needed access and couldn't get it. A few heads in the gallery nod subtly. Brooke notices. Her jaw tightens. Samuel clears his throat again, trying to regain some control. Your Honor, we acknowledge my client's lapse in judgment. But the incident was brief, and she is willing to pay the fines today. Caprio doesn't look at him. Counselor paying a fine is closing a tab. Understanding the impact, that's accountability. He closes the file momentarily and studies Brooke's expression. You said you were inside for 10 minutes, he reminds her. But according to the towing log, Officer Morales called for a truck at 9:50 a.m. The ticket was issued at 9:47. You did not emerge until 10:05. That's 18 minutes, Samuel says quietly. Brooke scoffs. Wow. So being off by a few minutes is now a crime? No. Caprio replies. But dismissing those minutes reveals your disconnect. 18 minutes is the entire length of a physical therapy warm-up for a child with mobility limitations. Her expression hardens again, this time with confusion. What does that have to do with anything? The judge sits back. Everything. He taps his pen lightly. A signal. This moment. This is where the story begins to shift. He gestures to the clerk. We'll hear from Officer Morales shortly. But first, Miss Harper, please read the full charges into the record, including the speed estimate. The clerk stands. At 9:42 a.m., Officer Dana Morales observed a silver Audi traveling at approximately 52 miles per hour in a posted 25-mile residential zone. The vehicle did not stop immediately when signaled, continuing for 2 blocks before pulling into the pharmacy lot. Upon approach, Officer Morales observed the vehicle illegally parked in a van-accessible space. Brooke interrupts. I was trying to find a safe place to stop. The clerk continues without looking at her. When asked for registration, Miss Langford did not comply after multiple requests. That's not true, Brooke snaps. I was looking for it. Caprio raises a hand. We'll review the body cam audio. For now, we're establishing the sequence. And suddenly, the tone changes. Caprio folds his hands on the bench. Miss Langford, ignoring a stop signal at high speed in a residential area is not minor. Children live there. Families. People walk their dogs, push strollers, cross between parked cars. Speed limits exist because lives become fragile at 20 per 6 miles per hour, let alone 52. There's no anger, only truth. And truth, spoken plainly, hits harder than scolding. Brooke's voice trembles, but not from remorse, from disbelief that she's being spoken to like this. You're acting like I'm some kind of criminal, she mutters. No, Caprio answers gently. I'm acting like your choices affected people you never thought about. He looks down at the file again, then up at her. You have lived in a world where doors open before you, where mistakes are cleaned up behind the scenes, where the consequences land softly. I understand that. But the law doesn't bend for pedigree. Brooke shifts, her confidence fracturing for the first time. Samuel straightens his tie, quiet for once. The judge continues. The fact that you call this a joke means we need to examine your perception of harm. Someone was denied access. Someone was put at risk. And someone, he taps the file, lost something they cannot get back. Brooke blinks, puzzled. Lost what? We'll get to that, he says. But understand this. Traffic court is not about punishing people. It's about preventing the next tragedy. The room absorbs the weight of it. The clerk clears her throat. Your Honor, Officer Morales is available to give her full narrative. Good, Caprio says. But before she does, Miss Langford, look around this courtroom. Brooke hesitates, then glances over her shoulder at the gallery. These people aren't here because they delight in punishment, Caprio says softly. They're here because they know something you've forgotten. Public spaces belong to everyone, not just the people who find them convenient. The silence that follows is not empty, it's instructional. And now, Caprio says, gesturing toward the officer waiting patiently at the side of the room, let's hear from the person who witnessed it all. Officer Morales steps forward, and Brooke's jaw tightens again because she senses that everything she thought she could control is about to slip out of her hands. Officer Dana Morales steps forward with the steady composure of someone who has stood in dozens of courtrooms. But today, there is something different in her posture. Not tension, not nerves, a kind of resolve. As though she knows that every word she's about to speak matters more than usual. Your Honor, she begins, hands clasped behind her back. On Monday, at approximately 9:42 a.m., I observed a silver Audi traveling westbound on Larchmont Avenue at what appeared to be a significantly excessive speed. She pauses, letting the phrase settle. I activated my lights. The vehicle did not pull over. I repeated the signal. The vehicle continued for roughly 2 blocks before finally turning into the pharmacy parking lot and stopping. Brooke scoffs lightly, barely audible, but not quiet enough. Officer Morales doesn't react. She continues. When I approached the vehicle, I saw it was parked in a van-accessible space. The signage was clearly marked. The pavement had the required crosshatch clearance. The driver later identified as Miss Langford was on her phone. Brooke interrupts. I wasn't on my phone. I was checking the time. Officer Morales looks to the judge. Your Honor, the video will confirm the driver was holding her phone while I approached. Thank you, Caprio replies. Continue. I requested her license and registration, Morales says. The license was provided immediately. The registration was not. I said I was looking for it. Brooke snaps again, louder this time. Morales nods politely, still professional. Ms. Langford moved items around in her glove compartment but did not hand over the registration, despite 3 separate requests. Caprio raises a hand toward Officer Grant Lee, who stands near the AV console. Let's play the audio. A brief hiss of static fills the courtroom speakers. Then, relax. Brooke's voice bursts out, sharp and impatient. Relax, okay? Do you know who my dad is? A murmur ripples through the gallery. Even Samuel Pierce closes his eyes for half a second. The recording continues, Officer Morales calmly repeating the request for documentation. Brooke sighs, complains about being late. Complains about the officer nitpicking, and at one point huffs, this is ridiculous. Real criminals are out there. When the clip ends, the courtroom is silent. Caprio folds his hands. Officer Morales, he says, did you hear the statement about her father at the time? Yes, Your Honor, she replies. Brooke leans forward. It was sarcasm, she insists. I was frustrated. Anyone would be. Perhaps, Caprio says gently. But sarcasm doesn't move ramps, Miss Langford. He glances at Ms. Harper. Do we have Emily Carter on the phone? The clerk nods and taps a key. The speaker crackles. Then a woman's voice, steady, warm, but with a strain underneath, comes through. Your Honor, I'm here. Thank you, Miss Carter, Caprio says. Please tell the court what happened Monday morning. Emily takes a breath. My daughter Grace is 6. She has cerebral palsy. Mondays and Thursdays are her physical therapy days. They're important. She has new mobility equipment, and every session helps her learn how to use it. Brooke shifts in her chair, but doesn't interrupt. Not yet. We arrived at the pharmacy at 9:52 to pick up Grace's medication before her session. I pulled into the lot and saw that the only van-accessible space was blocked by a car. Emily's voice tightens. A silver Audi. Parked over the access aisle. A hush falls. Emily continues. I tried to lower the ramp, but there wasn't enough room. I honked. I waited. Nothing. I had to drive around the block and find another spot. By the time I got Grace inside, we were 20 minutes late. She exhales. Her therapist said missing that warm-up might set her progress back a week. Maybe more. Brooke mutters something under her breath. It sounds like, I said I'd pay. Caprio hears it. Miss Langford, he says calmly, if you have something to say it clearly. Brooke sits up straighter. I offered to cover any costs. I don't see why we're dragging this out. I mean, there was no lasting damage. It was one appointment. A sharp silence fills the space between them. Emily answers softly, I don't need your money. I need people to stop treating accessible spaces like suggestions. Caprio speaks, his voice low. Thank you, Ms. Carter. We appreciate your time. The line clicks off, but the silence stays. Brooke opens her mouth, perhaps to defend herself, perhaps to minimize again, but Caprio lifts a hand. Miss Harper, he says, please read the text message submitted into evidence. The clerk clears her throat. From Brooke Langford, to an unnamed contact. Timestamp 10:03 a.m., Monday. Quote, got a ticket. Dad said he'll make calls. Don't sweat it. Brooke freezes. That was private, she says flatly. It is discoverable, Caprio replies. He leans back, tapping his pen twice. Let's outline the timeline. The citation was issued at 9:47 a.m. Your text was sent at 10:03. The first call from Senator Langford's office came at 10:18, and the second at 10:31. He folds his hands. Someone moved quickly. Brooke swallows. I didn't ask anyone to call. No, Caprio says gently, but you expected someone would. Her attorney stands, smoothing his tie. Your Honor, this line of questioning is bordering on prejudicial. My client cannot be held responsible for the actions of third parties. I request that the remainder of this hearing be conducted in chambers. Given her father's position, the remedy for spin, Caprio interrupts, is sunlight. We will stay on the record. Samuel sits slowly. Caprio turns his attention fully to Brooke. The room seems to narrow around her. I'm going to ask you 3 simple questions, he says softly. Answer yes or no. He pauses. Were you driving over 50 miles per hour in a 25-mile zone? Brooke's voice falters. Yes. Did you park in a van-accessible space without authorization? Yes. And did you refuse to provide your registration when asked by Officer Morales? Brooke hesitates. 2 wasn't refusing. I was just... That isn't a no, Caprio says. Her face flushes red. The confidence she walked in, with the laughter, the dismissive posture, crumbles under the weight of clarity. This feels targeted, she whispers, her voice cracking. People make mistakes every day and don't end up humiliated. No one here is humiliating you, Caprio says gently. But I'm noticing you. Noticing the pattern. Noticing the expectation that someone else will smooth over your mistakes. Her shoulders sag. Samuel glances at her, unsure whether to intervene or let the lesson continue. The judge's voice softens even further. Privilege, he says, is like a volume knob. It turns up your comfort and turns down the feedback life tries to give you. Brooke blinks, stunned, and when the volume stays too high for too long, Caprio adds, you stop hearing the people your choices affect. The room is so quiet, you could hear a breath drop. Brooke looks down at her hands. They're trembling. She whispers, barely audible. I didn't think it was that deep. That, Caprio says, is why we are here. He closes the file, not with finality, but with intention. Officer Morales, he says, turning his gaze toward the officer. Thank you for your testimony. Please step back. She nods and returns to her seat. Caprio's eyes return to Brooke. Now, he says, we begin the difficult part. Her head lifts slowly, bracing, because she realizes, finally, that the worst part of this hearing is not the charges, not the fines, not the courtroom full of strangers watching. The worst part is what she is about to learn about herself. A long breath moves through the courtroom, quiet, controlled, deliberate. Judge Caprio opens the next section of the file, glancing briefly at Samuel Pierce, then fixing his eyes on Brooke. What's coming now is no longer about the ticket. It's about the machinery humming behind it. Miss Harper, Caprio says, please read the log of communications received by this court within 1 hour of the citation. The clerk flips several pages. Her voice is steady, but even she can't hide the faint edge of disbelief. At 10:18 a.m., a call was placed to the clerk's office from a number registered to Senator Charles Langford's Providence office. No message was left. At 10:31 a.m., a second call was placed from the same number. At 10:42 a.m., another call from a secondary number associated with the senator's administrative staff. A voicemail was left. She looks to Caprio. He nods. Play the voicemail. A click. Then a polished voice fills the room. Smooth, confident, practiced. This message is on behalf of Senator Langford's office. We'd like to discuss Citation 77-340-9 involving Miss Brooke Langford. The senator wishes to explore options for a quiet resolution. Please return our call at your earliest convenience. Silence. A kind of silence that's thicker than air, like the room itself is holding its breath. Samuel stands immediately. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. My client had no involvement in these calls. She did not request them. To suggest otherwise, Counselor, Caprio says, lifting a hand. I did not suggest anything. I'm placing the facts on the record. Transparency is not accusation. Brooke watches her attorney sink slowly back into his seat. Her face drains of color. Maybe for the first time she's seeing the chain reaction her life generates without her lifting a finger. Caprio turns toward her again. Miss Langford, did you ask anyone to call this court on your behalf? No, she snaps. I didn't ask them to do anything. But you expected that they might, Caprio replies. Her eyes widen not in anger, but in bitter recognition. She doesn't say yes. She doesn't have to. The truth sits between them like an artifact. The judge turns to Ms. Harper again. Please read the text message, the one time-stamped 10:03 a.m. The clerk clears her throat. From Brooke Langford. To unnamed contact. Got a ticket. Dad said he'll make calls. Don't sweat it. A visible shudder moves through the gallery people, shifting, adjusting, reacting in small collective discomfort. Brooke clenches her jaw. It was a private message. You're taking it out of context. Context, Caprio says calmly, is exactly what we're adding. He stacks the papers neatly, tapping them twice. Let's review the timeline together. He lifts a finger. 9:47 a.m. The citation is issued. A second finger. 10:03 a.m. Your text indicates confidence that your father will intervene. A third finger. 10:18 a.m. The first call arrives from his office. A fourth. 10:31, another. A fifth. 10:42, a voicemail requesting a quiet resolution. He lowers his hand, folding it with the other. That is not coincidence. That is expectation. Brooke's glare falters. For a moment, she looks like a frightened child rather than a senator's daughter. Samuel stands again, slower this time. Your Honor, her father's actions are not on trial, Caprio says, but influence attempts, successful or not, discolor the process, and ignoring them would mean pretending the legal system exists in a vacuum. He leans forward slightly. It does not. A faint tremble appears in Brooke's fingers as she intertwines them tightly on the table. She looks small, no smaller than when she strutted in, smaller than when she laughed in the judge's face. The bravado is thinning, and truth is filling its place. Caprio nods to the clerk. Miss Harper, please, put through the next call. Is Ms. Carter still available? The clerk taps a key, then shakes her head. No, Your Honor. But the court received a follow-up statement from her daughter's physical therapy provider. She hands a paper to the judge. He reads silently, then speaks aloud. Grace's Monday, missed warm-up, resulted in reduced muscle engagement during the remainder of her session. Therapist recommends additional exercises at home to compensate for lost progress. He sets the page down. This is not an accusation. It is a reality. Brooke whispers, I said I'd pay for anything. Isn't that enough? The judge's answer is immediate. Time, he says softly, is not invoiceable. The room freezes, and access, he adds, is not a luxury. Her breathing quickens. She inhales sharply, but no words come out. Caprio sits back. Miss Langford, your responses, your laughter, Your dismissals, even your willingness to pay, all reveal something deeper. Not malice, not cruelty. He pauses. Detachment. Her eyebrows knit. She doesn't understand the word, or maybe she does, and hates hearing it out loud. Detachment, he continues, from consequences, from inconvenience, from the people your choices ripple into. A long silence follows. Finally, Brooke whispers, "Everyone speeds sometimes. Yes," Caprio agrees, "and most people regret it when they're caught. But they don't summon privilege to make the consequences evaporate." She swallows hard. "And most people," he adds, "don't block spaces that exist for someone else's survival." Brooke's eyes flicker upward, the briefest spark of resistance. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone." "No," Caprio says, "but intent does not erase impact." She looks away sharply, her shoulders tightening. "Your Honor," Samuel tries, "if I may." "You may sit," Caprio replies firmly. Samuel obeys. The judge opens a new document, thicker, more detailed. "What you see here," he says to Brooke, "is a pattern of choices. Not evil choices, not criminal choices, but careless ones. And carelessness grows more dangerous when power cushions the fall." Brooke's lips tremble. She digs her nails into her palms under the table, just out of view. Caprio lowers the folder. "I'm going to give you the opportunity to speak, and I encourage honesty over defensiveness. But first," he turns slightly toward the audience, addressing them directly, something he rarely does in the middle of a hearing. For those watching, he says gently, "Understand that this is not about shaming a young woman. It is about recognizing what happens when privilege turns down the volume of accountability." He returns his gaze to Brooke. "Miss Langford, I will ask you again, do you understand the harm your choices caused?" She tries to answer, opens her mouth, closes it, tries again. I don't know," she finally says. "I didn't think it was all this." Caprio nods slowly. "And that," he says softly, "is why we must continue." He closes the file. "We will now proceed to findings." Brooke stiffens. Samuel sits straighter. The room collectively leans forward. But Caprio lifts a palm. "Not the final ruling," he clarifies. "The findings that will shape what comes next." Brooke grips the edge of the table. She senses it, the shift in the air, the feeling that her world is about to stretch in a direction she's never experienced. She no longer looks defiant. She looks exposed. And for the first time since entering the room, she looks ready, though not willing, to hear what comes next. Judge Caprio takes a quiet breath before leaning forward, folding his hands in a way that seems gentle yet unmistakably decisive. The courtroom senses it. Something is shifting. The tension tightens, but not with threat, with clarity. "Miss Langford," he begins, "I want you to listen carefully, not defensively, not waiting to rebut. Just listen." Brooke doesn't nod, but she also doesn't interrupt. Her eyes, shaky but alert, lock on the judge. Caprio opens the findings document. The evidence supports all three charges. First, speeding. Officer Morales' estimate, corroborated by body cam calibration and distance logs, indicates you were traveling over 50 miles per hour in a 25-mile residential zone. That alone places pedestrians, children, and drivers at significant risk. Brooke's fingers twitch, but she keeps them clasped. Second unauthorized use of a van-accessible parking space. The signage was clear. The crosshatch markings were clear. And the consequences were real. He pauses not for drama, but for weight. Third, failure to comply with a lawful order. Whether intentional or obscured by frustration, the record reflects multiple delayed responses. He closes the folder softly. These are facts, but facts alone seldom teach anything. A ripple moves across the gallery, people leaning in, exhaling, waiting. Caprio turns his gaze back to Brooke. "You are 20 years old. You have no criminal record. And what's most important, you have the capacity to learn. A flicker of relief, fragile, passes through Brooke's eyes. But Caprio isn't finished. However, he says, lowering his voice, your prior administrative warning tells me this isn't the first time accessibility was treated as optional. Samuel Pierce shifts uncomfortably, but he doesn't dare rise again. You were warned once, Caprio continues. Not punished, warned, told that accessibility matters. Yet, here we are again. His words soften, but the softness cuts deeper. The problem is not that you are a bad person. The problem is that your life has insulated you from the experiences that shape responsibility. Brooke's jaw flexes. Her eyes glisten, but whether from frustration or something else is unclear. Therefore, Caprio says, the court must impose consequences that teach what privilege has hidden. He lifts a paper, a handwritten outline in blue ink. Here is the financial penalty, he reads. Speeding in a residential zone, $200. Unauthorized use of an accessible space, $250. Failure to comply, $40. Towing and storage, $210. Total, $700. Brooke inhales sharply, surprised, maybe offended, but she holds her tongue. Then Caprio sets the paper aside and lifts another. But I am staying $350 of that total, he announces, contingent upon your completion of what I call a restorative accountability plan. A ripple of murmurs spreads across the courtroom. Brooke's eyebrows rise, her attention sharpening. Caprio continues, this plan is not punishment. It is education. It is reflection. It is restructuring habits that will shape the rest of your life. He reads the first requirement. 1. You will write a genuine apology to Emily Carter and her daughter Grace, not a PR apology, not a template, a real letter acknowledging what you denied them. If Ms. Carter agrees to meet you in person, you will deliver it personally. Brooke looks down, cheeks tightening. 2. Caprio continues, you will complete 1 full week of volunteer service at the Providence Pediatric Mobility Center. Her head snaps up. A week of what? Filing paperwork. No, Caprio answers. Hands-on work, assisting with therapy room setup, mobility equipment prep, and family support. Brooke opens her mouth, but he lifts a finger, and she closes it again. 3, he says, you will write and record a 60-second public service announcement about accessible parking, its purpose, its importance, its impact. The script will be reviewed by the court. No branding, no embellishment, just truth. Brooke swallows hard. The idea of publicly admitting wrongdoing clearly stings more than the fine. 4. Caprio adds, you will complete a youth driver reflection course on the real-world consequences of traffic violations and accessibility barriers. 5, he says, you will submit a 600-word written reflection on what you learned, not slogans, not excuses. Honest insight. He lowers the paper. And 6, he continues, this time looking directly at her, you will spend 1 full day navigating the world in a wheelchair. The courtroom rustles in shock. Even Samuel's jaw drops. Brooke stares at him, stupefied. A wheelchair? Yes, Caprio replies calmly. A manual wheelchair. Through your campus. Through downtown. Through ordinary spaces where accessibility is too often an afterthought. You may have someone accompany you for safety, but no one may push you. Brooke turns pale. That show is that, Caprio says, is empathy, not simulation. Empathy. A small window into the daily reality of the people whose needs you dismissed in 18 minutes of convenience. The girl says nothing. The courtroom is breathless. And if, Caprio clarifies, you fail to complete any part of this plan, the stayed portion of your fine will be reinstated and additional penalties may apply. He leans back slightly. Do you understand the terms? Brooke's voice drops to a whisper. Yes. Good, he says. Because this plan is not about humiliation. It is about vision and growth. He flips another page and continues not about Brooke, but about the system around her. Additionally, he announces, I am recommending the following policy reforms to the Municipal Court Administration, Clerk's Office, and Traffic Division. He reads them one by one. 1. Establish an ex parte communication log published weekly, documenting any attempt by elected officials or their staff to influence pending cases. A stir travels the courtroom. 2. Implement mandatory recusal or supervisor co-sign protocols for any staff member contacted by political offices. 3. Create an expedited tow protocol for van accessible space violations. 4. Establish a clerk hotline for reporting attempts to interfere with judicial proceedings. 5. Roll out a youth driver education module addressing the practical impact of accessibility laws and speed violations. With each policy, Brooke's expression shifts from indignation to disbelief, to a sobering realization. Her case is no longer just her case. It is becoming a catalyst. Caprio lowers the papers and folds his hands again. Miss Langford, he says, you may believe your actions that morning were small, but small actions ripple. Small actions deny access. Small actions endanger others. Small actions accumulate into habits, and habits form character. He takes off his glasses, cleaning them slowly. This court is not interested in your pedigree. It is interested in your future. Then, softly but unmistakably, consider this your turning point. A long moment passes. Brooke doesn't speak, doesn't breathe, doesn't blink. Her entire posture seems to fold inward, as though everything around her has suddenly grown too large, too bright. Caprio places the file aside. We will reconvene in 2 weeks, he says. At that time, you will present the court with your completed tasks or documented progress. He strikes the gavel gently. Court is in recess, but the story is not. Because Brooke Langford, whose life has always moved forward effortlessly, is about to face a week where every inch, every ramp, every door, every delay requires work. For the first time, she will not glide. She will push. And in that push, everything may change. The courtroom door creaks open before anyone has fully risen from their seats. It isn't dramatic, just a quiet, weighted sound. But every head turns. Even Judge Caprio looks up. A tall man in a charcoal suit enters, the kind of person whose presence shifts the air. Silver hair, polished shoes, the posture of someone accustomed to deciding which conversations matter and which do not. His eyes sweep the room with a familiar authority. Your Honor, he says, voice smooth and controlled, I'm Senator Charles Langford. I'd like a moment to speak regarding my daughter's case. Brooke stiffens. Samuel freezes. The gallery murmurs. This is the moment everyone suspected might come, but hoped wouldn't. Caprio remains seated. Senator, he says calmly, this is an active hearing. You're welcome to observe, but I will not discuss the case with you outside the record. Langford steps forward. Judge Caprio, I'm simply requesting what you're requesting, Caprio interrupts, is an exception, and exceptions erode trust. Langford's jaw tightens. I am not asking for special treatment. I'm asking to resolve this quietly for the sake of everyone involved. There it is, the polite phrasing of pressure. Brooke's lips part as if she wants to stop him, but fear keeps her still. Caprio folds his hands. Quiet resolutions, he says gently, are how patterns continue. The senator's nostrils flare. He is used to shaping rooms, not being shaped by them. Your Honor, he tries again. If we could step aside. No, Caprio says. We will stay here, on the record, with every word heard. The hush that follows is so complete, it's as if the room itself is listening, and then something unexpected happens. Brooke stands, not timidly, not dramatically, just stands slowly, like someone gathering courage from the ground up. Dad, she says, voice trembling, stop. He turns to her, startled. Brooke, I mean it, she says. Please, let me handle this. Her voice cracks on the last word, not from weakness, but from truth being exposed after years of being hidden behind her last name. The senator studies her. He sees something he is not used to seeing. His daughter, standing without his shield. Brooke, this is already, I said. Stop. A breath. Please. The gallery holds their breath. Even Samuel is motionless. Judge Caprio nods slightly. Senator Langford, your daughter has counsel. She has a voice. Let her use it. Langford hesitates. For the first time, power has no place to go. Finally, he exhales, steps back, and takes a seat in the gallery an audience member, not an architect. Brooke sits again, trembling. The rearrangement of roles in her life is visible, heavy, uncomfortable, necessary. Caprio addresses her gently. Miss Langford, this process is yours, not your father's. She nods. I understand. The hearing ends shortly after, but the true journey is just beginning. The next morning, Brooke wakes up with an unfamiliar heaviness in her chest. Accountability has a weight no one warns you about. It lingers. It rearranges priorities. And it does not care about last names. She stares at her laptop screen where the apology letter sits half-written. Version 1, too defensive. Version 2, too polished. Version 3, too impersonal. In all three, she talks around the harm knot into it. She deletes every word. Hour after hour passes. She tries again, and again, and again. Each version is either insincere or dripping with guilt avoidance. Nothing feels right. Finally, sometime after midnight, she writes a draft that doesn't try to defend, justify, or minimize. A letter that names what she took from a little girl she never met. She reads it aloud, tears forming, not because she is sad for herself, but because for the first time she understands that she altered a child's week with nothing more than impatience. She submits the letter to the court for review. The next day, Ms. Harper emails back. Rejected. Too vague. Brooke stares at the screen in disbelief. Her first instinct is indignation. Rejected. After all that work. But that reaction fades quickly. She reads the letter again. This time she sees it. The gaps. The evasions. The softened language that avoids responsibility. She writes again. 3 more drafts. Another rejection. On her 5th attempt, Caprio approves it. Bring it when you meet Miss Carter. If she agrees. The gravity of if doesn't escape her. 3 days later, Brooke enters the Providence Pediatric Mobility Center. The doors glide open automatically. She notices them now, notices the ramps she once overlooked, notices the extra space between walls designed for someone else's wheels. A receptionist leads her to a small meeting room. Brooke clutches the letter like a fragile artifact. A moment later, Emily Carter enters. She looks tired, beautiful in the way strength is beautiful, lined with worry and patience. Behind her, in a pink wheelchair with stickers on the side panels, is Grace. The little girl is smiling, bright, open, unaware of the significance of this meeting. Brooke's throat tightens. Emily sits. Grace rolls next to her, curious. Brooke takes a breath. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. Emily nods. Let's hear your letter. Brooke unfolds the paper with shaking hands. Her voice quivers at first, but steadies as she names what she did not what she intended, not what she assumes Emily wants to hear, but what actually happened. When she finishes, the room is silent. Grace gently taps the wheel of her chair. Smiling at Brooke, Emily speaks softly. Thank you for the apology. Brooke waits, unsure if forgiveness is coming, or anger, or something in between. Emily continues. If you truly understand what happened, then make the most of this week. Brooke nods, eyes shining. I will. Day 4 begins her volunteer work. She learns how to set up therapy mats, how to organize mobility equipment, and how specific each adjustment must be. She watches a therapist spend 40 minutes encouraging a 7-year-old boy to push his wheelchair 4 feet. The child cheers at the endas, though he just climbed a mountain. By day 5, she's helping parents carry bags, clean equipment, prepare rooms. She notices something new each day, textures, weights, barriers she never saw before. On day 6, she tries assembling a pediatric walker. It takes 20 minutes. The therapist tells her parents do this every morning. By day 7, something shifts in her posture. She no longer moves like someone serving a sentence. She moves like someone discovering a truth she should have known long ago. Then comes the wheelchair day. Court approved, court monitored. A manual wheelchair sits waiting for her at the mobility center. She lowers herself into it, adjusting the footrests awkwardly. The therapist gives her a simple rule: 1 day. No standing, no shortcuts. Her father offers to accompany her. She declines. For the first hour, her arms burn. The slightest incline feels like a hill. Doors are too heavy, ramps too steep. Bumps in the sidewalk feel like craters. Strangers stare. Others look away too quickly. No one offers help unless she asks. Midday, she tries to enter a cafe. The doorway is narrow. A chair blocks part of the aisle. She can't get through until someone moves it. In the afternoon, she attempts to cross a 4-way stop. A truck blocks part of the curb, cut. She has to maneuver in the street. Every moment compiles into a truth she cannot unsee. By evening, she is physically exhausted, emotionally raw, and quietly transformed. The next day, she records her first PSA draft. Too polished, too rehearsed. The court sends it back. She records again, this time no makeup, plain background, nothing scripted except truth. Her voice cracks at one point. She leaves it in. By the end of the week, her reflection essay is complete, 600 words that feel like 6,000. She turns everything in, and for the first time in her life, she feels the weight of her own choices and the power of her own change. She is not done, but she has begun. 2 weeks later, the courtroom is unusually quiet. Not tense, just expectant, like everyone senses that something important is about to come full circle. The gallery murmurs softly, then hushes as the clerk calls the next case. Commonwealth versus Brooke Alexandra Langford. But when the doors open, there is no entourage. No attorney guiding her by the elbow. No senator shadowing her every step. Brooke walks in alone. Her hair is tied back simply. Her clothes are plain. She clutches a folder stuffed with neatly organized documents, volunteer logs, her reflection essay, the approved apology letter, a USB with her PSA recording. Everything has been done. You can see it on her face, not pride, not shame, but something steadier, something earned. Judge Caprio looks up as she approaches the podium. There's a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but no softness. No indulgence, only readiness. Miss Langford, he says, I see you've come without counsel today. Yes, Your Honor. Her voice is steady, though a tremor lives beneath it. Wanted to speak for myself. He nods once, briefly. Very well. Let's begin. Ms. Harper steps forward with a stack of documents. Your Honor, the court has received Miss Langford's apology letter, volunteer service logs, PSA recording, completion certificate for the driver reflection course, and her 600-word reflection essay. Have they all been reviewed? Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, Caprio says. He turns back to Brooke. Miss Langford, before I review my findings, I'd like to hear, in your own words, what you learned. No notes, no reading. Brooke swallows. She glances down at her folder, then slowly closes it, pressing her palms flat on top. I thought accessible parking was just close parking, she begins. I thought it was about convenience. I never thought about the measurements, the ramp clearance, the way van-accessible spaces require extra room. I didn't understand that a few feet can determine whether someone enters a building or doesn't. Her fingers curl slightly around the podium. I didn't know how it feels when the world isn't designed for you, she continues. But spending a day in a wheelchair showed me how exhausting it is, how humiliating it can be when people stare or when they don't look at you at all. How something as small as a doorstop or a slope becomes a challenge. The courtroom listens deeply. And I learned that accessibility isn't a favor, she says. It's infrastructure. It's freedom. She hesitates, breath trembling. And I learned something else. Something about myself. Caprio nods gently. Go on. Brooke's voice softens. I've spent my whole life assuming that if something went wrong, someone else would fix it. My parents. My father's office. My name. I never thought I was abusing anything, but I was relying on privilege instead of responsibility. A murmur ripples through the gallery, but she keeps speaking. When I met Ms. Carter and Grace, she pauses, pushing back emotion. Grace smiled at me, like nothing I did mattered to her. But her mom, she wasn't angry. She was tired. Tired of people like me acting like their time matters more than hers. Tired of barriers that shouldn't exist. A tear slips down Brooke's cheek, but she doesn't wipe it away. I didn't just take a parking space, she says. I took time from a child who needed it. Time she can't get back. I thought paying money could fix that, but money doesn't give back progress or trust. She inhales deeply. So, I'm sorry. Truly. I understand now. The courtroom is completely still. Judge Caprio lets the silence settle before he speaks. What did you learn from your volunteer work? He asks. Brooke's face softens. That people work harder for 1 inch of progress than I have ever worked for anything. I watched a little boy push his wheelchair 4 feet in 20 minutes and smile like he'd won something. And he had. And from your day in the wheelchair? Caprio asks quietly. She exhales shakily. That I don't ever want to be the reason someone else faces that kind of struggle. Caprio nods slowly. Miss Langford, what would you say to the version of yourself we heard on the body cam? A painful beat passes. Brooke whispers. I tell her to stop talking, to listen, to think outside her own life for once. And what would you say, Caprio adds, if your father someday needed a wheelchair? Brooke's face breaks just a little. I'd never let anyone block his access, and I'd never forgive myself if I knew I had done that to someone else. The judge lets her words breathe, honoring the space between them. Then he picks up her reflection essay, taps it once, and sets it back down. I've read your reflection. I've reviewed your service logs and your PSA. You did not treat this as a checklist. You treated it as a lesson. He removes his glasses. That matters. Brooke's lips part, hope flickering. That said, Caprio continues, accountability does not evaporate with effort. Her posture straightens. She nods, accepting whatever comes. I am remitting 206 Stieslers of the stayed portion, Caprio says. You will still owe $440, paid in installments over 6 months. Brooke nods again, relief gently washing over her features. Caprio raises a finger, not as punishment, as a reminder. Her eyes glisten. Thank you, Your Honor. He shakes his head. Don't thank me. Thank the people who taught you what privilege couldn't. A wave of quiet emotion sweeps the gallery. Then Caprio turns to Ms. Harper. Please file the completion documents into the public record. Yes, Your Honor. As Brooke gathers her folder, something shifts behind her. The gallery doors open quietly. Senator Langford enters not arrogant this time, not postured, but visibly humbled. He stands by the back row watching. Brooke turns, expecting disappointment or anger. But instead, her father gives a small nod. Not pride-respect, a silent acknowledgement that she stood on her own feet, that she faced consequences he once would have shielded her from. She looks away before the tears can fall. 3 months later, the ripple effects of Brooke's case spread far beyond the courtroom. The ex parte contact log becomes a weekly publication. 2 attempts by politicians to intervene in minor cases are flagged and reassigned. Traffic officers across the city receive new training on accessible parking enforcement. Towing response times for van-accessible violations drop by nearly half. The clerk's interference hotline receives 4 credible reports within weeks, each leading to quiet but firm internal reviews. High schools begin showing Brooke's PSA in driver education courses. It doesn't go viral. It isn't flashy. But the students watch and some ask questions they never would have asked before. One email arrives at the court from a parent. My daughter asked me why people block ramps. We had a good talk. Thank you. And somewhere in all of that, Brooke herself changes not dramatically, not loudly, but steadily. She stops using her father's name to open doors. She stops ignoring ramps and signs. She starts recognizing people she used to overlook. One afternoon, a friend of hers tries to pull into a disabled space for a second. Brooke's reaction is immediate. Don't, she says sharply. It's not ours to take. Her friend looks shocked, but Brooke no longer cares about appearances. She cares about access. She cares about accountability. She cares. Back in the courtroom, Judge Caprio ends a long week of hearings. Before packing his things, he reaches for a small note card pinned behind the bench. On it, written in his own hand, is a line he adds today. Growth begins when excuses end. He looks at it for a moment, thinking of a young woman who walked in laughing and walked out learning. Then he smiles gently, turns off the light, and closes the door behind him. The city changes slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Not because of a single ticket, or a single hearing, or even a single judge, but because stories ripple through a community the way vibrations ripple through glass. Quietly, steadily, with a force that reshapes everything afterward. Brooke Langford's story becomes one of those ripples. It doesn't make headlines. It doesn't become a viral scandal. It isn't plastered across news stations or splashed on magazine covers. Instead, it circulates through smaller channels, shared in coffee shops, by people who watched the hearing online, whispered between parents at therapy centers, discussed among teachers who saw her PSA in the school curriculum. It becomes one of those stories the public doesn't need to sensationalize, because the truth itself is compelling enough. 2 months after her final appearance in court, the first major policy shift takes effect. The municipal court's website publishes its inaugural ex parte contact logo, simple PDF, with time-stamped entries listing every attempt by an outside party to influence a pending case. Most of the entries are mundane voicemails from confused constituents, misplaced inquiries from administrative offices. But 2 stand out: calls from a local councilman's office regarding a DUI case, and a message from a campaign volunteer asking about options for a supporter's speeding ticket. Nothing overt, nothing incriminating, but the transparency is enough. Both cases are reassigned to different judges without fuss. For the first time in years, city officials feel the faint friction of accountability, a small but vital signal that political access no longer guarantees a shortcut through public systems. The second reform spreads faster. Traffic officers receive mandatory training on accessible parking enforcement, something long overdue. At first, the sessions are met with the usual groans: early morning schedules, paperwork, awkward demonstration videos. But as trainers show real-world scenarios, including clips from body cam footage similar to Brooke's case, the mood shifts. Officers watch a mother try repeatedly to lower a wheelchair ramp blocked by a car. They hear the frustration, the helplessness, the exhaustion. They see what they've overlooked for years. As part of the new tow protocol, any vehicle blocking a van accessible aisle is designated high priority. Tow times drop sharply from an average of 39 minutes to 23. In some districts, response is as fast as 15 minutes. Small victories, but meaningful ones. Meanwhile, the clerk's hotline receives its first 4 interference reports. None of them involve major political figures or dramatic scandals. They're the kinds of infractions that normally slip under the radar. A junior aide making a friendly inquiry. A private attorney implying a mutual acquaintance. A business owner hinting about campaign donations. All 4 are documented, investigated, addressed quietly but firmly. Word spreads, and just like that, attempts to influence cases begin to dry up. Not because people suddenly grow virtuous, but because the cost of trying becomes visible. And visibility is a powerful deterrent. As winter approaches, the youth driver education module launches. In classrooms across the city, teenagers watch a series of short videos. Some are animated, others narrated by disability advocates. But one segment stands out not because of flashy editing or dramatic music, but because of its sincerity. Brooke's PSA. It plays in a dozen schools the first week. In the video, she looks straight into the camera. No makeup, no designer clothes. Just a young woman speaking plainly about a mistake that taught her more than any classroom ever had. When she says, "Access isn't optional," her voice cracks slightly. And that small imperfection makes her message stronger. Teachers report that students stay unusually silent afterward. One class sends questions to the City Mobility Center asking for a guest speaker. Another starts a project analyzing accessibility issues around their school. None of them know Brooke personally, but her story has entered the curriculum of their lives. Meanwhile, Brooke herself remains mostly invisible to the public eye. Not on purpose. She simply returns to her routine with new habits stitched into her days. At school, she refuses to cut lines or flash her last name to bypass administrative processes. When a friend jokes about pulling into a disabled space for just a sec, she reacts swiftly and firmly. When she sees a man shove his shopping cart into a crosshatch zone at a supermarket, she speaks up, not rudely, just truthfully. He moves it. He apologizes. She walks away, feeling something she hasn't felt in years. Alignment. She even returns occasionally to the Pediatric Mobility Center, not because the court requires it, but because she wants to. She helps run warm-up sessions, organizes equipment, and spends time talking with parents in the waiting area. Grace always beams when she sees her. One afternoon, the little girl hands Brooke a drawing, a simple picture of her wheelchair beside a rainbow. Underneath it, in wobbly crayon letters, it says "Thank you." Broke, the O missing, because Grace's hand sometimes wobbles. Brooke laughs and cries at the same time. The world feels different now, not harsher, not brighter, just clearer. And somewhere beyond her personal orbit, the city continues shifting. One example stands out. A month after the reforms, Senator Charles Langford attends a public hearing about disability access infrastructure. Cameras flash, reporters whisper, and the room hums with curiosity, not because a senator is speaking, but because he requested the floor voluntarily. He clears his throat. Many of us, myself included, have overlooked how fragile access can be for some members of our community, he begins. It took a difficult lesson within my own family to understand that accessibility isn't merely an architectural concern. It's a moral one. He never mentions Brooke by name. He doesn't need to. Everyone in the room understands. But the significance is not that he speaks. The significance is that he listens. Back in the municipal courthouse, Judge Frank Caprio finishes another long week. Fines paid. Cases closed. Lessons attempted, some learned, some resisted, some yet to take root. As the gallery empties and the lights dim, he sorts through his papers, preparing to head home. Then he reaches toward the corkboard behind his bench. Patchwork of handwritten reminders he adds to over the years. Today he pins a new note card. Titles expire, character remains. He steps back, studying it, not with pride but with reflection. He thinks of Brooke of her laughter when she first walked into his courtroom, and the quiet courage she found when she walked out 2 weeks later. He thinks of Emily and Grace, of all the unseen struggles they carry each day. He thinks of every case where influence whispered, where power tried to bend truth, where someone hoped privilege would erase consequences. And he thinks of his own words, spoken to Brooke during her final hearing. Growth begins when excuses end. He breathes out slowly. He turns off the last light. He locks the door behind him. And the courthouse, just bricks, wood, paper, and echoes holds the weight of every story it has ever shaped. In the end, Brooke's story reminds us of something many people forget. Harm isn't always loud, dramatic, or intentional. Sometimes it comes from small choices, parking just for a minute, assuming someone else will deal with the consequences, believing convenience outweighs someone else's need. But life has a way of showing us that empathy grows the moment we slow down and truly see the people around us. Accessible spaces, speed limits, and simple courtesy aren't rules meant to restrict us. They're structures designed to protect the most vulnerable among us. Maybe you've witnessed a moment like this in real life. Maybe you've been the person who rushed, or the person who was blocked, or the one who finally spoke up. Whatever your experience, stories like this remind us that accountability isn't punishment, it's an invitation to grow into better versions of ourselves. Tell us in the comments, what lesson from this story stayed with you the most? And if you believe more people should hear stories about justice, compassion, and real transformation, don't forget to subscribe for more.